Well, hello, and a very good evening to all of you, dear viewers. This is your host, Akhlaq Ahmed, and you're watching your own English learning channel, Learn English with Akhlaq Ahmed, an English teacher from AMU. Now, in today's session, we will discuss questions and the answers, rather, to the questions given at the end of the two poems by Milton, prescribed for CBSE Elective English Class 12. So, you see, the first poem in this case is On Time. Now, let's try to answer the questions mentioned here. Uh, let's check and see. Question number one. Why has the poet pitted the flight of time against the lazy, leaden stepping hours and the heavy plummet space? So, pitted, you know, when this word is used as a verb, that is to pit something or someone. This means to put someone or something in opposition to or in competition with, or to match with. Now, the question therefore implies, why has the poet compared or matched the flight of time, the movement of time, with lazy, laden stepping hours and heavy plummet space? Plummet, as you're aware, refers to the ticking mechanism in a clock. Now, while discussing the poem, you see, we considered the point and we noticed that the poet urges the time to fly. In fact, the poem starts with the expression, fly envious time. And the word fly suggests that the poet wants the time to move quickly so that it may reach its end, so that the day of judgment may come quickly and the virtuous, that is, the virtuous men and women, may be rewarded on the day of judgment, so that we may achieve the state of heaven where we would not only be blessed with unmatched and endless joy, but at the same time we will become eternal and we will never die. In other words, the day of judgment will put an end to the miseries of the worldly life. And, you know, according to the poet, you see, once the count of time ends, we will achieve, that is, those who are virtuous will achieve the greatest reward, that is the sight of God and, of course, the heaven, and we'll win over time. Now, you see, various poets and writers have in fact dealt with this concept of time, and many have believed that time is a ravager, it's a destroyer, it destroys our physical beauty, and it destroys everything. So, and you know, many poets and writers have challenged time. Milton is one of them. He challenges time, he throws a challenge and asks it to run quickly, run its race out, so that it may meet its end and we are freed from the shackles of time, uh, from the shackles of minutes, hours, and days, and weeks, and months, and years, and we would become eternal. Now, when we have an objective, or suppose we are waiting for somebody, then the feeling is that the time passes very slowly. This is our feeling. Even if it's 10 minutes, we'll feel as if an hour has passed. So, the idea is that time is a burden on human beings because it blocks their way to eternity, especially the way of the virtuous people to eternity. So, it has become a burden, and that is why the flight of time is pitted against the lazy, laden stepping hours and the heavy plummet space, suggesting that seems to be moving or passing very slowly, and it is
Stop recording video button. Open camera. Recent stop recording video but pause video recording button.
well, really sorry. Sorry, there was a disturbance. I'm sorry for that. Now, you see, time becomes a burden because it blocks our way to eternity. And so it seems to be moving very slowly, and in short, that is why it has been compared to lazy, laden stepping hours. It seems to be lazy. It seems as if the hours are moving slowly, as if they are laden stepping, and the clock is ticking very slowly as well. So, in brief, the time, the flight of time is pitted against the heavy plummet space and lazy laden stepping hours because it becomes a burden on human beings and it blocks their way to eternity, joy, and happiness. Next, question number two. What are the things associated with the mortal, and what are associated with eternity? Now, you see, the things associated with the mortal are, uh, you see, what the poet calls the mortal dross. That is, everything which is a kind of a waste or wastage, um, anything which is perfectly wrong, wrongdoing, evil, and death, and of course, as I said, anything which is false, falsehood, vanity, false pride, wrongdoing, evil, sins, and anything which is against good is associated with the mortal. The poet refers to, uh, uh, say, whatever is false and vain, and then he refers to mortal dross. Uh, Mortal dross means that which is perishable. So anything which is perishable is related to the mortal. And then earthy grossness. Later in the poem, towards the end, the poet says earthy grossness, which means all earthly things, including wrongdoings and evil and sins, all these are associated with the mortal, because when we'll die, these things will end with us. And look, it also includes each thing bad. Obviously, that is covered in wrongdoing as well. And as far as the eternal is concerned, you know, the things associated with eternal, or the aspects related to the eternal are like happiness, joy, anything that is sincerely good and perfectly divine, truth, peace, and love, uh, and you know, so all these qualities, virtue as a whole, is associated with the eternal. So these are the things. I mean, that is the contrast between the mortal and the eternal. Everything or anything bad or wrong or sinful is mortal, and everything or anything bad or good is eternal. Uh, the mortal would therefore include things like vanity, falsehood, uh, anything which is bad, and of course sin, and of course the eternal would include the reverse of it, that is joy, perpetual joy, never ending joy, happiness, love, because these are virtues, The eternal include the virtues of all kinds, like love, peace, joy, sincerely good, perfectly divine. All these things, all these aspects of human life are eternal. Now, they ask us what guides human beings, human souls, towards divinity, that is, towards God, and who is the final winner in the race against time. So, look, it's virtues like truth, peace, and love. The light of these virtues will guide us or our human souls towards divinity, towards the supreme throne, that is the throne of God on the day of judgment, of course. So, as a whole, our virtues, the light or the sparkle, the glitter or the shine of these virtues, of our virtues, will guide us to divinity on the day of judgment. And the next question associated with it is as to who is the final winner in the race against time. You see, we are all fighting a race against time. Once we are a child, then we grow up, become adult. Again, we grow up, become a youth, and ultimately we become middle-aged. Then we touch the declining years and enter the old age, and ultimately we die. Now, in this process, we have no control whatsoever on this process. That is, even if in the old age we want to be a child, we can't be a child. If in the youth we wish to be old, we can't be old. So it's out of our control. The time is irreversible. The time keeps passing. So, in a way, it seems as if the time is winning over us, is winning the race against us. It runs it runs our race. People come and die and disappear, whereas the morning, the noon, the afternoon, the evening, the night, and this process, the day, the night, the week, the months, the years, they continue. So seemingly the time appears to be the winner, but that's not the case. The poet says and believes that the virtuous man is the ultimate winner against in the race against time, because on the day of judgment, the virtuous people would be rewarded and they would go to heaven. They would get a chance to see God, which would be the greatest reward, and they would achieve eternity. They will overcome things like death, fortune, and of course time. So then there'd be nothing like death, there'd be nothing like fortune, and there'd be nothing like time. All time will be continuous. This time count of morning, noon, afternoon, and evening and night will disappear. There'll be a continuous sunshine, and we'll all experience never ending joy. So, in this sense, man, or rather the virtuous man, is the ultimate winner in the race against time. That is, if we are virtuous. So, it's typically a religious point of view. Now, let's take up the questions at the end of the poem entitled on Shakespeare. The first one is, why does Milton feel it is not necessary to put up a monument in stone for Shakespeare? Well, Shakespeare is described as the labor of an age, the product of an age, or an age in himself. And we build a monument in stone for one person, for one individual. But Shakespeare was a whole age in itself, a whole era in itself, so that monument in stone will not do justice for him. So obviously, it's not necessary to have a monument in stones for Shakespeare. There is another aspect to it which we will cover in answering to the next question. That is, what does weak witness of thy name refer to? In fact, the weak witness means the refer to the tall pyramids or the monuments in stones. The tall pyramids built on the tombs of the dead persons, and of course the monument in stones, um, whether it's a statue or whatever, which are erected, they are weak witness. They are weak witness because Firstly, they cannot do justice to the status of Shakespeare. Uh, Secondly, they are temporal, subject to destruction. A storm, a flood, or a war may destroy them. For example, nobody knows where exactly is situated the tomb of Alexander the Great or Napoleon the Bonaparte. You know, great conquerors, we do not know where on earth are they resting. So they have almost disappeared. Whereas Shakespeare survives in the consciousness of human being, in the memory of human beings. And the poet says that, uh, in fact, he has for himself um built a monument for himself. He has built a monument for himself in our memories. And this monument is long lasting. It's not going to end with one person or another person. That's why Shakespeare is still remembered even after 500 or 600 years after his death. And the time will continue. That is, the generations will continue to remember Shakespeare. So, the point is that a monument in stone is only a weak witness, uh, of, is referred to as a weak witness. That's the reason. Now, how does Milton describe Shakespeare as the source of inspiration for all succeeding generations of poets? Now, Milton describes the verses of Shakespeare's as easy numbers, natural poetry, natural song. This natural song has emotional complexity as well. And together, the beauty of Shakespeare's verses, in fact, inspire the succeeding generations of poets to work hard and use their mental ability, imaginative ability rather, to create and compose something which is like the creation of Shakespeare, if not exactly
Free up memory.
the Shakespeare's creation, or which may be closer to Shakespeare's creation. So, you know, Shakespeare's verses have got that naturalness, that ease, that natural force with a kind of a complexity or a philosophical note, you know, not just natural verses. It's not just the natural force, instinctive uh, creativity of Shakespeare, but also the depth and complexity that his poetry carries as a whole. The two things, his art and craft, we might say. His craft is, in a way, like easy numbers, and his craft, that is the meaning and the philosophical aspects of his poetry, the emotional complexity, and so on, uh, the depth and complexity of his poetry, together, you know, these two things inspire, the succeeding generations. So, easy numbers, that is, uh, Shakespeare's poetry technically has got natural ease, it's natural poetry, and thematically it has got depth and complexity, and together his art and craft inspire the succeeding generations to create something similar to what Shakespeare has created. Then, the last question: what is the best tribute that posterity has bestowed on Shakespeare? Posterity, that is the time to come. We have ancestor, those who come before us, and posterity is the time that comes, that is to come after us. So the best tribute that the posterity has bestowed upon Shakespeare is uh, to remember him, to give him a permanent place in uh, the human consciousness, in the human mind, in human memory. The common man, the one who is not a creative writer, is in fact delighted to read his verses. And, you know, the fact that the man continues to be delighted by his verses ever since those verses were created. So that factor has earned Shakespeare a permanent place in the hearts of his readers. So, you know, the way uh, the people have remembered Shakespeare is the best tribute to him. Because the best way of appreciating or, you know, praising any writer or poet for that matter is to remember his verses, to remember him um, as a whole, as an artist, as a human being. So, you know, and it has happened in case of Shakespeare, not just the people of his time, but the people who came after us and who have been coming after us up to now have remembered him. So this is obviously the best tribute that posterity has bestowed upon Shakespeare. Now, this language work, they've explained that each word has an etymology, that is the what is known as the history of linguistic change, and you know each story has a word, and it the history of a word and the derivation of a word. These two things are listed in the dictionary along with them. So they also inform us that most of or about 30% of the words in English are of French origin, at least in Middle English. And most of the borrowings in English are from French, no doubt. So that is an aspect of, you see, we are told that the borrowings from French, in fact, reached its height after the Norman conquest that occurred in 1066. This was a period between 1250 and 1400. So this is some information about etymology, language, I mean word borrowings and all that, which you can study thoroughly on your own. This requires no help or guidance. So we have covered the questions, and
Portrait.
you see, uh, this is the time then that we should say goodbye to each other until we meet again. Take care, relax, enjoy, and goodbye to all of you. Thank you very much.
Stop recording video.